First story. Treat me like poo. Enjoy a union drive. So this happened during the later stages of the 90s. 1998 to be exact, but I will not disclose the location or names of the people involved. I was working for a business run by what appeared to be a normal mom and pop type. After about a month or two of working there, it became apparent these mom and pop owners were in fact real jerks. Constant belittlement, ranting raving sessions for the slightest mistake, and absolutely cheap to bone when it came to wages. At the same time, I was working two jobs due to bad wages, and at my other job there was a union drive happening. I was just out of high school back then and did not know anything about unions, and the people who were organizing this did not educate anyone. It just threw a card in your face, told you to sign it, and then left. I was not actually there for the card signing. I was hired just after the cards had been signed. And this was still a mystery to management. I literally was hired just before the crap hit the fan there. Where I live, and at the time, labor laws were set up so 51% of the employees working at a business were required to get a hearing before the label board regarding certification. When 51% of the signed cards were received at the ministry, an application for certification was faxed to the senior management at the location, detailing all sorts of legal information. I am not sure of all the details. I do know that at that precise moment no one could be fired, demoted, or have their wages changed. At least until after the hearing at the label board, where a decision would be made to accept or reject the application for certification. By this point, it turned into a lawyer show, with lawyers from the union and business slugging it out. This happens. The place goes ape crazy, literally with middle management and union drivers in screaming matches. It was chaos. But I was not there. I was at my other job, dealing with nonsense I usually dealt with a mom and pop operation. A month or two goes by, and the newly organized business settles down. But there is anger, resentment, and hate bubbling under the surface. Lines are being drawn. You did not want to find yourself on the wrong side. But me, being a fresh-faced 18-year-old out of high school, and not knowing what was going on exactly, chose to side with the friendly manager who hired me. After all, it was him who gave me my shot, not the organizers of the union drive. And the union organizers did nothing to educate me, just threatened me with not wanting to be on the wrong side of the line when everything was finalized. If I haven't lost you yet, I want to take a moment to say, for the record, I am not an anti-union. I'm much older now, and time has given me perspective, and I don't always agree with labor, but I know a strong labor movement is healthy as well. Another debate for another time. Well, the day comes when the pickets go up, and this being a smaller town, the media is there as well. I left my other mom and pop bad job and came to work at the newly unionized business I was recently hired at. Not knowing what to do, I chose to cross a picket line and go to work. The results of that were to be placed in a group of socially undesirable after the pickets were down and business resumed. Meanwhile, I continue working both jobs, the mom and pop job getting more and more insufferable each day. Most of the workers at the union job won't talk to me, and all this nonsense from both sides is really beginning to take its toll on a sensitive, dumb 18-year-old kid that just wanted to work, hang out, play, and just do whatever they want. Then I have an idea. I'm done with the mom and pop job. I'm done with their nonsense. If a union drive can happen at the one place, why not here? Also, I'm literally giggling like a little Asian girl at this idea. Why don't I get the same union that I crossed at my other job to unionize this place and get back in their good graces again? So I called up the guy who led the original organizing drive, and after a 3-hour session of coffee and notepads, He agreed to help me out. And the next day I started to hand out cards at the mom and pop business. The union business agents I dealt with could not be involved at this point. Legally, the signing of the cards had to be done with everyone's free will, and it had to be brought forth by an employee, not a union representative. They supported me, coached me daily on how I should tackle the problems that were arising. But they would not show up at the business until after the application for certification was officially registered at the ministry. They were adamant about this, but assured me they would be there, guns ready the moment it happened. Well, I got my revenge on these petty, power-mad mom-and-pop losers. The union drive took its toll on all of us, but in the end, I could not get enough people to sign and I was fired. I called the union business agents and they told me not to worry. The union drive was dead, but they were going to sue my former employer on my behalf. What I never told the union was I always knew the union would fail. It was a smaller business compared to the place where I had crossed the line. And I knew the people at this business, the mom and pop business, really didn't care either way. But this was a way to legally get back at the owners of the mom and pop and claim my reputation with the union at the same time. This was a small town, and even though I was a dumb 18-year-old, I knew this was the kind of thing that would follow me around forever. I wanted to be on the right side of the union, just in case I ever needed them in the future. So, the union sued them, and they won. I got a small settlement out of it and I regained my reputation with the union, which helped me out many years later. But that's another story for a later time. Next story. Their neighbors sued them for wanting to add another story to their house, so my grandparents built two. So to establish some things. The parents of my father own a couple of apartment complexes in this big city, Germany. They, as well as me and my parents, all live in this one house, but in different apartments. My father grew up in this house and never moved away. I will probably one day move to another floor. I'm 19 years old, but I do not intend to leave this house. My grandpa just told me that in the early 80s it used to be just one story high. So really just a very long but super short house, if that makes any sense. I am living on the third floor at the moment, so I asked how this came to pass. And what he told me was absolutely hilarious. Okay, now to the story. My grandparents wanted to add another floor/story to this very long and flat house. So they obviously contacted the authorities and got all the paperwork done. Everything was fine. Then their neighbor found out about this and got really mad. He owned and still owned some other apartment complexes in the same area and on the same street. He inherited those complexes from his father. My grandparents reminded the neighbor that they had a deal with the neighbor's father, that if my grandparents wanted to add more floors to their houses, then the neighbor would comply as long as he also could add more floors. All the neighbor had to say to this was, "Yeah, that's what my father said to you. But now he's dead, and I don't want to add another floor to your house. I will sue you if you do that." To which my grandpa just replied in his sweetest voice, "Alright, do it." The reason why the neighbor could sue us for adding another floor was some weird clause in the German law that existed at that time. It stated that a house only could be so high so that the houses next to it would get a specific amount of sun and air, so that it wouldn't cast too big of a shadow on the other houses around. My grandpa knew this was a total BS, because a few houses in this area already had like 7 floors, so it wouldn't be an inconvenience if our house would stock up. So he went to court. He told me that there literally was a court meeting and a trial on the street in front of our house. He brought a lawyer, his attorney, police officers, and some specialists from the State Department with him. There, the specialists said that our house could actually be 3 floors tall without dropping this neighbor any of his heir and son. With the attorney and the lawyer as witnesses, everything was settled. Then the neighbor came over and had a fit, screaming and huffing the whole time and demanded that it should only be 1 floor at most. My grandpa said, "Alright, we will do 1 floor and then we're gonna see what we will do next." They built the floor and then, because that's what the specialist said, they built another. Right as when the workers wanted to start to work on the second added floor, so in total 3rd, the neighbor came flying. Them asked to know why they are doing 1 more than they said they will do. Police were called and the police already very tired of this whole situation, and especially with the neighbor. They told my grandpa to continue building because the concrete was already mixed and ready to use. This house is now 3 floors high. I don't really know what happened to the neighbor because I never met him, but my grandpa said that they are fine now. There was some kind of story that ended up with my grandpa actually building walls around some of the windows of the 3rd floor because the neighbor demanded some BS about fireproof windows. And it's definitely fireproof if you ask me. Next story. Manager made me work while I was high on painkillers. Around 2 years ago, I used to work for this grocery store right around the corner from where I lived. I loved working there. I constantly had something to do, and when the store wasn't busy, I would talk with my co-workers and just enjoy the night. My main position was in the bakery/hot food area, but since we were only a small one, only 1 worker would be in at a time. A regular night would involve me slicing meat, serving food, and putting the baked goods into the oven. After about 6 months of working there, I found out that I was moving town. I felt terrible and gave my manager my 2 weeks notice. I really felt terrible because this was out of the blue and they had to train someone new, so I offered to work without pay for the 2 weeks so they wouldn't lose money. My manager said no, it was fine, but he greatly appreciated it. Out of nowhere, I developed a severe pain in my mouth and discovered that my wisdom teeth were coming in and were causing some weird damage to my jaw. This resulted in me needing emergency surgery on the weekend after my 2 weeks notice was up. The day after my surgery, my manager texted me, "We need you today. A scheduled worker called in sick and no one wants to cover his shift." Actually, boss, I just had surgery last night for my wisdom teeth right now, and I have taken a bunch of painkillers to soothe the pain. Also, my 2 weeks notice is up, so I technically don't work for you anymore.
Do I sound like I care? We need you, and if you don't come right now, I will see to it that you don't get hired anywhere else. So how does working sound like now?
I was shocked. Before today, my manager had been the best boss to work for, so I was utterly surprised. Alright, I'll be in soon, I guess.
You better be or else.
About 5 minutes later, I got dropped off at work. Normally, I'd walk there, but I had taken so many painkillers that I could barely remember how to get there.
What took you so long? I've had to cover for you in the bakery for the past half hour.
His last text was only sent 5 minutes before that. I quickly apologized, walked into the bakery, and started doing my work. Normally, I'm a good person who wouldn't start trouble. But because of how high I was ready to start making this manager's life a living hell. Every time he asked for someone to help him out with a task, I would volunteer to help. Each time I would make myself fall off of the ladder or cause food to come crashing down on me. He kept telling me it was alright, but as the night went on, I could tell his blood was starting to boil. So I continued. As the end of the night neared, my job was to clean the meat slicer and I had a plan. I began to clean the meat slicer, but I accidentally turned it on. By this time, I had no problems controlling my body, so I came as close as I could to cutting myself without actually doing it. The manager walked in to see me do this and immediately screamed at me and told me how I could have killed myself. And I just responded with a confused look on my face and said, "Oh, whoops." He just sat there looking at me and pulled me into his office where he began screaming at me for all the stupid things I had done that night. The falling off the ladder, the dropping food on me, and now the meat slicer. But instead of getting upset because it was technically his fault, I just sat there with a blank look on my face, pulled out my phone, and showed him the messages he sent me. And he was silent. I stood up and told him, "You'll be hearing from my lawyer." And I walked out. The grocery store ended up firing him for mistreating the employees, and he also got sued for harassment by one of the other employees. The store also gave me a hefty paycheck because they decided to settle it out of court instead of fighting a lawsuit that they would inevitably lose.